Season 2 of Wednesday didn't have the space for a single dull moment in its roster. If you thought Season 1's Hyde was an eye-catcher, the newest installment simply upped the ante by introducing an evil avian killer, 2 Hydes, and of course, the iconic zombie. Tim Burton really pumped up the 8 episodes with an overwhelming amount of subplots. Initially, it had us scratching our heads because, unlike the first season's simple murder mystery, which took 8 whole episodes to solve, in Season 2, Wednesday Addams found the avian killer she was hunting and ended up stumbling on a much greater conspiracy in the process. But even then, there were still plenty of other questions left to answer. From Principal Dort's true intentions to the mysterious Lois patient, we really had plenty going on. But Mr. Burton, sir, we're sorry we weren't familiar with the magnanimity of your game, because nothing paired us for the mystery of Pugsley's pet zombie, Slurp. Throughout the second part of the latest season, we see Slurp's metamorphosis into Isaac Knight. As he regains his ability to seem more human, we understand just how twisted he is. So, without wasting another moment, let's figure out the physiological abilities of Isaac Knight together. Before we get too deep into things, we do have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. It's a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
You missed!
Isaac Knight could not have survived without his mechanical heart. So, according to Nevermore Academy's Caliban Hall tradition, Ajax tells the younger students about the tale of the Skull Tree. Ajax tells them a story about a former Nevermore student with a brilliant mind and a fragile heart. This boy was mostly confined to his bed, but that could never hold him back from dreaming of building machines one day. According to the legend, one day this boy went on to design a mechanical clockwork heart to replace his real heart after the doctors told him that he only had a few months to live. So he proved them wrong by wiring his new mechanical heart inside his chest, and this way, his body could keep his dazzling mind alive. While this invention definitely saved his life, it also changed him drastically, making him cold and goal-oriented to the point where he didn't care about anything other than advancing his own inventions. Which makes sense, because how can a mechanical heart make you more human? By the time he arrived at Nevermore Academy, this boy became the most brilliant student to ever attend. But unfortunately, his experiments and inventions became just too dangerous for him to control. As his creations became increasingly more erratic, so did he. And one day, one of his experiments backfired, causing a massive explosion that ended up killing him by throwing him out of the old Iago Tower. According to Ajax, ever since, this genius boy with a clockwork heart has been buried in an unmarked grave at the base of the Skull Tree at Nevermore. And, as the legend goes, anyone brave enough to get close to the tree could still hear the sound of his mechanical heart ticking away at the skull's hollow left eye. Now, this urban legend is clearly inspired by Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart, where we see the old man's heartbeat turn into a clockwork heart that ticks with the inevitability of time itself. It was described as a low, dull, quick sound, such as that a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. The pulse of the old man in this tale became less a sign of life and a metronome of guilt, with each beat marking the narrator's unraveling. This clock-like rhythm fused biology with machinery, and whether the sound is real, supernatural, or imagined, its steady mechanical persistence drives the narrator to madness, showing how guilt can often become as relentless and precise as the ticking of a watch. But the boy with the clockwork heart's tale in Wednesday is far worse than that. After hearing this story, Pugsley is immediately enamored by the tale of the Skull Tree, and so Wednesday's Nimrod brother makes plans to go out into the forest to see if he can find any evidence of the boy actually existing. During the Founder's Pyre, he sneaks out to the Skull Tree all by himself and puts his ear to the Skull Tree's left eye to listen for the heart's ticking sound, only to be startled by a bird flying out of the crevice of the tree. Pugsley then falls and accidentally electrocutes the ground with the lightning powers he inherited from his father's side of the family. As it turns out, just that tiny jolt of electricity was powerful enough to resurrect a zombified version of the boy with the clockwork heart, who then crawled out of the ground by digging his way out of the tree. Pugsley, who was super lonely and desperate for companionship, then decided to keep the zombie as his pet and eventually named him Slurp. Little did he know that this mindless, brain-eating zombie was actually Isaac Knight, an evil genius who had a rather long, dark history with the Addams family. We saw right from the beginning how Slurp became more human with every brain he ate. We also got the first hint at his secret backstory when he escaped his cell and went on a killing spree in Willow Hill Psychiatric Hospital. Having regained the ability to speak, Slurp said hello to an old friend, former Nevermore Academy professor Augustus Stonehurst, before eating his brain. But amidst it all, even through his metamorphosis process, his clockwork heart kept ticking, meaning that the lightning bolt from Pugsley jump-started his heart and kept it going, allowing him to survive as a zombie. Isaac Knight is actually a Da Vinci. So after escaping from Willow Hill, Isaac went looking for another missing patient who was basically the unidentified woman that Wednesday had saved in the mid-season finale. Soon, this woman was revealed to be Tyler Galpin's supposedly dead mother, Francois, and as it turns out, she was also Isaac's sister. While the tale of the skull tree wasn't wrong about Isaac losing his humanity as he grew more ambitious, his mechanical heart still warmed for the one person he truly loved, and that was his sister, Francois. He hated the fact that he could get himself a chance at life while his sister was gradually fading away. Since Francois's Hyde transformations were slowly killing her, he wanted to invent a machine to take away her powers by killing the monster inside her and saving her life. After months of hard work, Isaac finally managed to invent a similar machine in his secret laboratory in Iago Tower, which Professor Stonehurst had built for him. It was also revealed that Stonehurst stole Isaac's invention after his death and repurposed it for his experiments at Willow Hill. As part of the long-term Outcast Integration Study, aka LOIS, Stonehurst found a way to use Isaac's machine to not only take away Outcast's powers, but also transform them into normies. In fact, he had successfully given his daughter Judy avian abilities, and she continued his work after Augustus himself became a patient at Willow Hill. It seems that Stonehurst was also behind kidnapping Francois by faking her death and then experimenting on her for years until Wednesday freed her. With this in mind, it's no wonder Isaac was so eager to kill both Augustus and Judy. Now that we have a little bit of context on Isaac's backstory, let's discuss his relationship with the Addams family. So, aside from Francois and the Stonehursts, the only other relationship Isaac had at Nevermore was with his roommate and best friend, Gomez Addams. Morticia claimed that Gomez had endeared himself to Isaac with his natural charm, but Isaac still viewed him as a pawn and intended to use him accordingly. However, this proved to be his fatal mistake, as the Addamses were responsible for Isaac's death. In Wednesday's animated sequence depicting the tale of the skull tree, Isaac was clearly shown to have died when one of his experiments caused an explosion that threw him from Iago Tower. But in reality, it wasn't because of any technical errors or misjudgments in his rogue experiments. Instead, the explosion was caused by Morticia, who had realized Isaac's true intentions. When Isaac needed a way to power his machine, Gomez had happily offered to help, but Isaac conveniently neglected to tell his friend that the experiment would kill him after using all of him as the power source. In fact, Isaac had already dug him a grave by the skull tree even before his experiment began and intended to bury Gomez there after sapping out all of his lightning powers. Luckily, Morticia realized that the love of her life was in danger and intervened to stop the experiment just in time to cut off Isaac's right hand, thus making him lose control of the machine and causing it to explode. While Francois, Morticia, and Gomez survived the explosion that followed, Gomez had permanently lost his outcast abilities, and Isaac was the only one killed. Following this, Gomez and Morticia covered up his death after Professor Stonehurst threatened to have them charged with murder if they exposed his illegal lab, so they buried Isaac in the same grave he had originally dug for Gomez. After this whole fiasco, it turned out that Isaac's severed right hand had been reanimated during the explosion, so Gomez and Morticia took him in and named him Thing, an anagram of Knight. Thing had no memory of where he came from, so he happily became a member of the Addams family and served them faithfully for many years. The Hand has been struggling throughout Season 2 as he felt more like a servant than an Addams before he eventually seemed to be coming to terms with his situation in life. As such, Thing was just as surprised as Wednesday when Isaac came back to reclaim it. Isaac needed his right hand to restore his Da Vinci powers so he could finish the experiment and carry out his revenge against the Addamses. So, after making Wednesday and Thing walk right into his trap, Isaac promptly reattached his right hand to his wrist after mentioning how he had been a Da Vinci who are incomplete without their right hand. Isaac then uses his powers to drop Wednesday into a deep grave and bury her alive, but luckily, Agnes, having watched the entire thing while being invisible, ran to Enid for help. After the Addams family digs Wednesday out of the grave, they run to Iago Tower to save Pugsley, but Isaac had already begun his experiment. The only change here is Tyler being strapped to the table instead of his mother, much to Isaac's dismay. Apparently, it was too late for her, but Francois wanted her son to have a chance at a normal life, who, by the way, was absolutely not happy about getting rid of his powers. As the process starts, Wednesday breaks in with an axe, and Tyler, who was in pain from being constantly shocked by the machine, begs her to kill him. Instead, she uses the axe to set him free and says that her hand merely slipped. So as Francois and Tyler face off in their Hyde forms once again, Wednesday frees Pugsley from the other side of the machine. Before escaping, Wednesday smashes the machine with an axe while a distracted Isaac watches as Tyler fights his mother. The machine explodes right before Wednesday can detach Thing from Isaac's arm, and during this time, Francois voluntarily falls to her death. This, of course, enrages Isaac, who had only ever loved his sister and wanted to save her, and so he used his Da Vinci power to strangle Wednesday, but luckily, his right hand has a figurative heart of its own, and it was definitely not mechanical. As Morticia and Gomez call out to Thing, he regains consciousness, and we see a rather cool fight between a brain-eating zombie and its own hand. Luckily, Thing wins by ripping out Isaac's mechanical clockwork heart, leading him to fall dead on the ground and allowing Thing to grotesquely sever himself from Isaac's arm, thus ending his menace. That being said, this is probably the first case of a zombie with a mechanical heart and a sentient hand, so, bravo, Burton. What made Thing come to life after Isaac's mortal death? We already know that Isaac was a Da Vinci, and as he mentions, a Da Vinci's right hand is the most powerful part of their bodies. But that still doesn't explain what caused Thing's reanimation. Personally, we think that after the tower's explosion killed Isaac, the electrical current, which used Gomez as its power source, surged through Thing, thus bringing him to life. But precisely how that's even possible is left unclear. I mean, if Pugsley could make Isaac's clockwork heart beat again, it's 100% possible that the electrical energy powered by the full extent of his father's abilities possibly reanimated Isaac Knight's right hand into a sentient being of its own. Even then, it's still a mystery to us, as Thing has no beating heart or brain, but he's still a sentient living being all on his own. I mean, it's certainly possible that this also has something to do with Isaac's outcast powers, as all his Da Vinci powers were stored in his right hand, but regardless of how exactly Thing functions as a living being, there's no doubt in Wednesday that he has his own identity and personality. At first, it seemed that after being reattached to Isaac, Thing was gone forever. In the end, though, he ultimately managed to find his free will again with the help of the Adamses. When Wednesday demanded answers for keeping Thing's identity a well-concealed secret from everyone, Morticia and Gomez explained how Thing had absolutely no memory of anything before Isaac's death. The hand simply had no idea whom he had been attached to, and certainly wasn't aware that the rest of his parts were an evil genius who had once tried to murder Gomez. Though we don't get to see what those first days and weeks with the Addams family looked like, we can assume that Gomez and Morticia embraced Thing wholeheartedly and protected him from the memory of his dark past. Since the Addams were all that Thing knew, it makes sense that he would have stayed with them without asking much about his past. It wasn't until Season 2 that we see Thing suffering from an identity crisis and even going to a support group for severed body parts organized by Professor Orloff. He was clearly thinking about where he came from and felt that some part of him was missing. And sure, it was perfectly possible that Thing would abandon the Addams family entirely once he was reunited with the rest of his body. However, when Wednesday was being injured, Thing couldn't stand for it, because we all know that his bond with her has always been immensely special. Thing just wouldn't have stood back and witnessed Isaac hurting his closest friend. In fact, after the whole ordeal ended, Thing threw away the knight chess piece ring that had belonged to Isaac, which he had kept all those years, so as to embrace his pre-existing identity. How powerful was Isaac Knight? Perhaps the most indispensable weapon in Isaac's armory was the head on his shoulders, because even if he was alive or undead, Isaac was an evil genius who possessed an incredible intellect. He was able to create many different inventions for his own benefit and created the clockwork heart that saved his own life. In fact, when his sister was dying due to her status as a Hyde, he created a machine that could remove the monstrous part of her and save her life. He even built the machine that helped Professor Orloff's head to stay alive inside a jar filled with some kind of liquid, thus helping him live on for 30 more years. Isaac had always been brilliant. That's why Augustus Stonehurst built him an illegal lab inside Iago Tower and stole his life's work after he died. Isaac's body was mostly decayed when Pugsley reanimated him, but after consuming animal brains, his body began to regenerate. The progress was surprisingly fast, as Eugene literally saw a brain growing in his skull within a matter of seconds after Isaac had his first human brain. Since then, Isaac was naturally drawn to humans and ate their brains, which further accelerated his regeneration. Soon, he was able to form clear words and eventually regained his intelligence. In time, after his regeneration was fully complete, Isaac no longer looked like a zombie. In fact, you couldn't even tell if he was actually human or undead. Moreover, Isaac was a Da Vinci when he was still a human, meaning that naturally gave him telekinetic abilities, as he could move things around with his hand, like the time we saw him hold up a notepad and pencil in the air to draw. But of course, after Morticia cut off his right hand, Isaac's Da Vinci powers left him even after he regenerated. He only got his powers back after he forcibly reanimated Thing back onto his right wrist, thus seizing his Da Vinci abilities back even as a zombie. Plus, once he rose from the dead, Isaac was a very unfettered zombie who was shown to be surprisingly resistant against bullets and other forms of weaponry because of his undead status. And since he was consistently shown to overpower his prey, it can be inferred that Isaac also had superhuman levels of strength, which allowed him to easily hold others back without any concern about them being too strong or heavy. We also believe that his strength increased with every brain he ate, which is how it was easier for him to do one-on-one fights after his complete regeneration. Isaac Knight was not without his weaknesses. I mean, the guy is dead, so of course he had a couple weak spots. Starting from the top, Isaac Knight was already born with a whole set of health issues, and even if he did find a loophole to cheat death, it definitely had an effect on his body. In no way did the clockwork heart make him invincible, as Isaac was vulnerable to death by many sources, such as the explosion that originally killed him. Sure, after Pugsley resurrected him and during his time as an undead zombie, he definitely possessed a degree of immortality, as Isaac was able to shrug off most attacks and could even withstand direct gunshots. However, upon completing his regeneration, it appeared that his mortality had somewhat returned. He could be easily killed again. Not just that, even after he initially became a zombie, Isaac looked like a molting carcass. In order to fuel his regeneration and become more than a glorified pet for Pugsley, Isaac had to constantly consume brains. On his first day back, he survived on a mystery meat sandwich from Nevermore Academy that was made up of ground-up chicken brains and pig butts. But Isaac later moved on to human brains, which was integral in furthering his development and amping up his regeneration process. We see the evidence of this after Isaac was captured and kept in Willow Hill Psychiatric Hospital, where he wasn't given any brains and so his regeneration stalled. But after his escape, Isaac resumed feasting on human brains and was soon able to complete his regeneration after killing almost all the security guards to chomp on their brains. Even then, Isaac always needed to continue eating human brains to keep his regenerated body from turning back into a zombie. It's similar to how vampires need to drink a certain amount of blood to keep themselves from turning back into a desiccated corpse, and we think Isaac's anatomical design works the same way, which is definitely a weakness, as it means he needs a constant supply of human brains, which are kinda tough to come by. Lastly, we have to talk about Isaac's clockwork heart. Ironically, the very heart Isaac created to keep himself alive was also the thing that ended his life, meaning even after he resurrected as a zombie, Isaac needed his clockwork heart to keep ticking in order to live. This was proven after Thing was able to rip out the heart, which immediately led to Isaac's quick demise. So that's everything we know about Isaac Knight's unique physiological features. Having said that, did any of you guys pick up on any weird tension between Isaac and Francois? The nature of their relationship as brother and sister was definitely a little off. I mean, it wasn't just us, right? You guys saw that? Let us know what you think in the comments section down below because we're really curious. Like, what the hell? As always, if you enjoyed this content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Otherwise, have a good one, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.